Welcome to the Divorce Podcast, a podcast that explores divorce, separation and co-parenting here in the UK, countering the often sensationalist way it's portrayed in the media, challenging the status quo and driving for reform. On each episode, I'm joined by experts to discuss divorce, separation and co-parenting from different angles. I'm Kate Daly, a relationship counsellor and divorce coach, co-founder of Amicable and host of the Divorce Podcast. In this episode, we're joined by Ian Soars. Ian is Chief Executive of charity Fagans, the creator of Dad.Info. Fagans is a UK Christian charity that focuses on supporting mental health and has championed childhood since 1870. Dad.Info was established in 2008 as a new generation men's lifestyle channel and the leading voice for dads. Dad.Info celebrate the changing role of dads with engaging, helpful, practical, entertaining resources and content for every stage of a dad's journey, including divorce and separation. It's the largest connected community of actively involved dads. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you very much, Kate. It's really good to be here.
Thanks so much for joining me. Let's start then, if we may, Ian, by just tell me a little bit about why you created Dad.Info.
So there's a long involved history, but Fagans primarily, as you said in your very kind introduction, is a mental health charity. So we provide qualified counselling to young children, about 400 or 500 every week. And one of the things that we see coming out of our therapy rooms is some of the challenges that fall out from family breakdown and divorce and separation and so on. And actually, when we looked at Dad.Info, and we acquired it a few years ago, one of the things it was doing uniquely was speaking into very complex family situations, particularly divorce. So whilst it's got this kind of major narrative, if you like, of being the best dad you could be, interestingly, people who are using the site, 45% of them are female, and its unique voice is really speaking into some of the pain and challenges of divorce and separation.
Right, so it's not exclusively for divorce and separation, but it sounds like that's one of the main thrusts of the sorts of information you provide and what people are looking for.
Essentially, when people come to Dad.Info or similar websites, they're reaching out for help or support or guidance. For most of us, mums or dads, parenting is always a very challenging time, and we do speak to that. But I think sometimes with divorce and separation as parents, that's when we're really on our back foot. We've never done that before. We're not sharing it with many people. And, for many of us, we're looking for a community that understands some of the pain and trauma that we've gone through or are going through. And we're looking for someone to support us and inform us. So, we tend to get a preponderance of that, mainly because it's in the range of parenting experiences. Perhaps looking after our children through separation is one of the most painful, and that's when we reach for help the most often.
And what sort of topics do you tend to cover? What are the most commonly asked questions from dads at that time when they're divorcing or separating?
I think the most common question is this normal? Is this usual? Does everybody else experience that? And obviously having a community of people to gather around. But, when we have a big forum, there's about 41,000 people in this forum, and a new user comes on, and those sort of things come out often wrapped in confusion, frustration, even anger. Actually, it's really great to see people who've been around a while, who've further down the process, both, perhaps legally, but also emotionally, gathering around them saying, hey, mate, just take a breath. It's going to be okay. So the topics that we cover, we'll cover everything from parenting in lockdown to having complex conversations with your children, not just about separation and divorce, but about as they grow up, as they become adolescents, their sexuality, and maybe ideas and insights into what does being a great dad mean. And I think particularly for men, we've lost sight sometimes of the role of fathers, and we try to release a lot of articles into that particular space saying, actually, you've got value. Whether you're living with your children or you're not, you've got value and you've got something to add to that. But of course, our demographic means that we keep that, those conversations as open as we can, because we've obviously got a lot of mums looking at that website as well.
Well, it's interesting you say that, isn't it? Because I would have thought Dad.Info would just maybe naively that Dad.Info attracts the dads, and there seem to be a large number of websites dedicated to mums and parenting from a mum's perspective. So how do you keep that uniqueness?
We wrestle with this question day in, day out. We speak to the dads primarily. That's our voice to make sure that they know. Often when you're going through separation and divorce as a dad, there's a significant loss of identity that you didn't factor in at the beginning of that process. You know, I'm not just a co-partner. I'm a father to my children. And if the children aren't there, you go, well, what am I? So you don't just lose one part of your life. For many dads, it can feel like they've lost a whole part of their identity, and they don't know. And you know, often mums can make it look as though they're coping really well. You think, "What am I needed? What's my role?" And there's two answers to that. That yes, you are needed, and maybe articulating what that role is, but also actually saying, well, actually, your job is to continue to support, however great your ex-partner is doing. You know, she will need support in raising the children, and your children need you as well. So that we don't have a great divide between dads and mums. We would reject that. You know, very much we want to support and care for fathers, but we want to do that in the context of healthy co-parenting and in a way that's supportive of women in general and mums in particular.
Yeah, because it's very easy when you go onto some social media sites for things to become quite polarized and almost like battle lines between mums and dads. And it always makes me sort of die a bit inside when I see those sorts of conversations where, there is a desire to polarize and then to have to take sides. What sort of techniques or what sort of tactics do you have to be able to try and keep the conversation as a parenting conversation rather than, as I say, battle lines?
So, when we're talking just prior to this podcast, Kate, you were talking about co-parenting. And, one of the underlying themes of what we're trying to say as a therapeutic organization, as much as a website, is that kids need their parents, mum and dad. And that from a therapeutic perspective, from a child's perspective, actually the war of mum and dad, you might win a small, battle, with your ex-partner. But the damage done to young children in particular, but all children, can be very deep indeed. And so what we're saying is actually, the guns have got to come down. You've got to do this together. You've got to figure out a way of presenting a united front to your children, even in the vortex and the pain of separation and divorce. Because although that might be really hard for you, however hard it is for you, it's going to be harder for them. We often explore with dads and in fact parents. So I work with parents of both genders as a practitioner. We often explore what it would look like for an 8-year-old child that perhaps they've got if they can share everything about mum with dad and share everything about dad with mum, and that they always feel safe when they're doing that, rather than thinking, oh, I can't talk to mum about that aspect of dad's life, or I can't talk to dad about that aspect of mum's life. Because then essentially what the child is doing is becoming a negotiator or a politician, trying to think what they are and not able to say. And the safest place in their world, which should be with mum or with dad, is no longer safe. They can't share everything. And that's quite a burden for young children to hold. So what we say is, dads, you're great. But, in that mix, mums, you are great too. And it's together that we're stronger. And as you say, the battle lines are false and they're unhelpful. And I think, for children, can be deeply hurtful.
Yeah. And I think, from our perspective, from an amicable perspective, one of the places that seems to whip up those battle lines is if you go down a court process. You instantly are set parent against parent. There is somebody who's going to effectively win, in quotes, someone who's going to lose. There is a battle and there are hard decisions to be made by judges who don't know your family, don't know your children, have 20 minutes, if you're lucky, to prepare before sitting down with you. And how then, if it's such a hideous way of doing things, why do so many people still end up in that court system? And how can we as practitioners help people to stay away from the courts?
Well, I think the mission of Amicable is a beautiful thing, which is to take the anger and emotion as best as it's possible out of the whirlwind of divorce. And in terms of, how do we keep families out of the law courts and why do they go in? I think often, in my experience of people going through, particularly in the early stages of divorce, they want their say in court. They want their justice. They want their day of righteousness or whatever. And actually, that's just not what happens, as you know, Kate. Often we're left sorely disappointed. And so I think when we're talking to families, what we're saying is, if you're looking for that, you're not going to get it in a law court. The best thing that you can hope for is justice for your children. And what that looks like is mum or dad working together. And there's a whole thing you can unpack there. But there is no justice in divorce. There is no day of you get your revenge. There isn't of that. Really, the law courts are there to be coldly set out a method of separation that, as you say, is done by someone with limited and no knowledge of the family. And really, if only mums or dads understood that the experts in the room are them and that they are the best people to know what is best for their kids. And if only they can say, well, even if this person has hurt me greatly, I can see the value in them being in the lives of my kids. And I promise you, male or female, dad or mum, that would be the message always to all parents who are going through this.
Yeah, I agree. It just feels like such a waste of time and money to force parents down that road. And I feel we need better information and better ways of signposting to people to alternative help, don't we? That doesn't involve a court and a judge.
Yeah, I think there's got to be a national conversation about what does separation and divorce look like, and again, going back to some of the things we were talking about earlier, Kate, there just seems to be a misunderstanding about what the court process achieves, what it's there for. And it is, it's really a place of last resort. And I think actually the judges themselves and the court system itself would say the same thing. And, through lockdown, they struggled with the volumes, and now a lot of these issues have been settled over the telephone. And my goodness me, I wouldn't want to bet my future relationship with my kids over a 10-minute phone call. We need to say, look, as a national conversation, when you've come to the end of the relationship, there is no need for, as parents, for you to the whole thing to break down. Even if emotionally between the two of you it's broken down, you can stay together. And I talk a lot about how do you tell your kids you're going to divorce, about separation and stuff like that. Some of the messages that are good and some that are unhelpful. But what is not helpful is if your children see that you lawyer up and, get like a lightsaber, you lawyer up and go to battle. What are we teaching our kids in the middle of that? And what is happening to their security? And that's the conversation I think we need to have publicly and in compassion.
You mentioned lockdown there and the fact that the courts have been overwhelmed and overrun. What sort of questions are you being asked from dads during lockdown? What are the key concerns?
So the huge thing, as you know, we've just done a survey. The interesting thing about the survey was we actually got the data just before lockdown. We're about to run the survey again. It's a survey of 1,000 recently divorced parents, 500 mums, 500 dads. We're just about to run it again. But even in that survey, it was done in sort of late March, April last year. You're seeing the tick up in terms of access to children, where that was already becoming complex. Over the last year, in Dad.Info in particular, on the forums, the amount of time that non-resident parents are getting with their children it's just collapsed. We're talking about 20-30% of what they got before. And, you might have got a weekend before. Now you're talking about, an hour or two. And there's a whole host of reasons why that might be. And in every circumstance is different and so on. But it has been particularly painful. COVID and lockdown has brought a whole rash of complexity to this. And part of that was the law courts didn't really operate effectively for 3 or 4 months. And when they did, it was via Zoom or via phone. And so the backlog, which was already big, got bigger. And now, of course, bless them. But the legal system is trying to cope with really what I would say is a tsunami of complex family issues, which haven't got better with time. As you know, unresolved conflict doesn't tend to ease.
No, exactly. And what sort of advice are you giving dads at the moment then? So let's just take a typical example, as you've just outlined, is where the normal pattern of seeing your children has reduced. What can you say to a dad in those circumstances to help, and what's the way forward?
Well, if I could start with the mums for a moment, I think there's a danger that, again, there's this kind of, we could easily toxify, mums are doing this and restricting access. And I think, the UK has gone through an unprecedented time where parents are struggling with home education and they're struggling with trying to keep their job down and flexible hours and half furloughed and loss of income and all that sort of stuff. And in the middle of that, of course, you've got the additional complexity of caring for your children. So in that context, it has become much more complicated for mums to be able to say, oh yeah, sure, come anytime you want, because there's lockdown and there's access restrictions and all sorts of things. So in that context, we say to dads, well, okay, it's going to be difficult, but if you get the hour, take the hour. Take what you can do, keep the relationship strong, be upbeat with your ex as best as you can, try and make it work for them as best as you can. If that whole hour is all spent on homeschooling, just do the homeschooling, because this is going to ease. And actually, the most important thing, one of the things that we saw in the survey, Kate, was it's quite a shocking number, but 38% of dads don't see their children post-separation for a period of up to 4 months post-separation. And what we're saying is, okay, with that kind of number, and it's like another 15% at greater than 6 months, with those kind of numbers, we just need to make sure that we make the use of the opportunity we got. And I would also say, as a point of comfort, that if you think an hour is not much time, that's true. But it's all a child needs. They just need to connect. They need to have that relationship. Doesn't matter whether you're doing maths or throwing a ball. Even an hour a week, that's great. And you can always build on that. And the kids will remember that. So what we're saying is take the hour or take the 2 hours, whatever you're getting. And as lockdown eases, as homeschooling eases, as March rolls on and the kids go back to school, and perhaps actually if we've done our best as dads to engage with our children, bless our ex-partners as best as we can, hopefully things will ease for us in terms of getting more time with our children.
It's fascinating, the results of that survey. I mean, one of the things that we have seen is that in some ways, whilst of course there are lots of people for whom lockdown has been a real blocker to maintaining contact with their kids, for certainly some of the people that we've been talking to where there's a commitment to do things more amicably, COVID's produced an opportunity as more parents, whether they're mums or dads, work from home. And it's created a flexibility, and particularly for dads, where at the moment it is still typically dads that work full time and mums that work part time. There have been more dads working from home and having that flexibility, and therefore either feeling empowered to say, well, you know what, this is a way of working I want to maintain because I can have some of that extra time with my children. I can do some of the after school care, or I can do if they're still being homeschooled, I can still do the making lunch and everyone having a quick lunch together, whatever. All of those precious moments that occur in that casual downtime are more available to more dads. And so we've seen quite a few dads have a complete sort of rethink about how they want their lives to look post-pandemic. And I just wonder whether that's something you've come across at all.
We absolutely have come across it. In fact, full confession, I am one of those dads. So I don't really want to go back to my commute prior to this. I don't want to go back to being in the office at 8 o'clock. I have relished being with my kids. And I would say it's a bit easier for mums and dads of older children, who are able to sort of self-motivate. If you've got a 2 or 3 year old, I know that's a different story. But yeah, I think there is a great opportunity for us culturally to seize this. And certainly my organizations, everybody's flexi working now. So everybody's obviously working from home. We've got a head office, it's empty. We could have gone back, we didn't. People's working hours are wrapped around their family, not around a random clock. And if people have got that, I would say, particularly to men, don't go back. Stand your ground in the workplace, because actually the vast majority of families are going to be blessed from this. Whether they're together or separated is not the issue. And actually, I would say for a separated dad sat at home, it's an extraordinary opportunity, because the windows of opportunity a couple of years ago to see your kids were so limited into the weekend, and now you're there and you can do homeschooling. It's great, and be there meaningfully in your children's lives. The only thing, what the surveys are showing is that whilst men definitely, I think, dads are making the most of that, the lockdown has disproportionately impacted women in terms of workload, homeschooling, and so on like that. And I did a podcast recently. I was just saying, man, get your school thinking caps on and sit down with your kids and learn to do algebra again, because it's important. We can't. But I think that's an opportunity for men, not a burden. I think we should really embrace that and build a relationship with our kids, because our kids know. They know who's investing in them, and without going through your background, Kate, as a psychologist, you know that one of the biggest demonstrations is of time and of commitment and of sacrifice that a parent can show to a child. And actually, when you're doing maths with them, they will treasure that as much as going swimming. I'll tell you that much, and certainly more than a burger. And they might not value it at the time, but when they look back, they say, "Oh, my dad cared."
Yeah, exactly. And I think everybody says it, don't they? And I don't want to sound twee, but there is an opportunity within lockdown to change the social dynamic.
Yes.
But that whole idea of, the kids needing both parents and needing different people at different times of their lives is so important. And I just think with COVID, we have an opportunity to redefine the world of work. And if we redefine the world of work, de facto, we will open up many more opportunities to co-parent in different and innovative ways to the benefit of our kids.
But again, going back to a point you made prior to this, Kate, about the purpose and mission of Amicable, this is easier. That social change that you're talking about is easier outside of the toxicity of a blame-storming, lawyered up, bitter, court-led divorce. If once those emotions have been stirred, once those difficult days and difficult letters and horrible moments of in the ping pong of such a divorce have been said, it's hard to row back. And the mission of Amicable to, in a sense, create a foundation where ex-partners, mum and dad, can work together for their kids. It's just, that's what makes that utopia that you just described possible. And also, Kate, if you don't mind me saying so, it means that less children end up in our therapy rooms. And of those 450 children every week, 150 are in there because mum and dad did the separation or divorce very badly. And that's I think that's sobering, a very sobering number. 150 children every week, one-to-one, with a qualified therapist, trying to unwind some of the things that they heard and saw and understood. And, if we can if organizations like Amicable, and also I know it's a different part of that mediation type approaches, where, things have got a bit heated and so on. I just think that's the way forward for the UK. And our legal system's cut out for it. It's perfect for it. You guys are doing something extraordinary, which, I think is exciting. And I'm glad it's growing so fast, because I think it could be a real way of us doing family better and co-parenting better post-divorce and separation. So that, yeah, absolutely. I want utopia, but you've got to get the building blocks in there, Kate, and that's what you guys are doing.
Exactly. Prevention is always better than cure, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Let's end on a couple of tips on prevention then. So if you've got either a mum or a dad coming on the website at the very start of this process, they want to have the best possible opportunity to co-parent their kids, what are the basic tips? What are the do's and don'ts?
Let's start with the do's. So do tell your children together and all together. Do it alongside each other. Maintain eye contact. Kids look for that stuff. It's simple, but they do look for it. Do not do a blame storm in front of your children. Here's a difficult one. Endorse each other in front of your children. I think your mum's a great mum. I think your dad's a great dad. You don't need to say, he's the best man I've ever seen. She's such a wonderful woman. Those words might turn into poison in the laps. I get that. But if you can endorse them as a parent and, I just really want them to do well from here, I would say, here's a couple of don'ts. Don't tell them that you don't love each other anymore. Because actually what you're saying is, once we loved each other, now we don't. Today we love you, tomorrow we might not. And although it seems like an obvious thing to do, if you can fall out of love with each other, perhaps you can fall out of love with your child. That's what they hear. It is important because a child will not be able to understand, up to about the age of 12 or 13, the world of other. So it's really important that they know that it's not their fault. And you can't just say it's not your fault, because they won't believe that. But you have to say, we both adore you. It's got to be language like, you've done everything that we've ever asked. You're so proud of you. We think you're so kind. We think you're so good. So they get the wave of approval and to say, it's grown-up stuff. It's great. One day, we'll tell you, but it's grown-up stuff. And what the child hears there is, it's nothing to do with them. If you sit down with anyone and say, if I sat down with my child and say, it's not your fault, everybody knows it's the English way of saying it's your fault. So we have to be more creative than that and say how much we approve of them. So then beyond that, a couple of tips. Try and set as much as you can in co-parenting common rules like on bedtimes and homework and so on. And if it's really difficult with your ex and you're trying to do everything, trying to speak positively of them and everything like that, and you can't, blame the house. And this is how this works. So your child says to you, oh, daddy lets me go to bed at 10 o'clock. And you say, well, in this house, we go to bed at 8 o'clock. And they say, oh, daddy says that I can eat ice cream before I eat my cabbage. And you say, well, in this house, we eat our cabbage first. And what happens is, instead of you being the bad cop, believe it or not, the house becomes the bad cop. And so much so that if your children are younger, they will one day say, sometimes I really hate this house. But it depersonalizes the good cat, bad cop, and if you're suffering with that, that's maybe a tip that has helped a lot of people in the past, and that maybe
I like that. I like that a lot. Well, look, we've run out of time, Ian. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for your time today. Where can people find you, find out more about you?
So we've got 2 websites. There's a therapeutic website, and so that's for counselling and parenting and so on, and that's fegans.org.uk. That's FEGANS.org.uk. And then if you're a dad or in fact a mum and you're looking for support, about, I'm going through a tough time here, I want a community of parents that can support me, Dad.Info, just as simple as that, Dad.Info. And you'll find there's a great big forum there of every conceivable question and answer. It's all been answered there 1,000 times, and hopefully that'll be of help to you.
That's lovely. Thank you. And of course, you can find out more about our podcast and to subscribe for updates by visiting thedivorcepodcast.com. And you can also find me on Twitter at Kate_Daly. Thanks so much, Ian. It's been an absolute pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Kate.